Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube, Instagram Reels, TikTok, wherever you get your social media, we're likely there. Today we're kind of doing a review not too far back in time, but one that certainly capitalizes off of 2024's IMAX ushering of just awesome experiences. And we're going to be talking about Dune Part 1. Dune, was one of the unfortunate souls that suffered during Warner Brothers' COVID release strategy, which saw day-to-date releases go right to HBO Max, which, I think, it was a tough spot that they were in. I'm not going to defend Warner Brothers at all because I know they messed up a lot of back end deals for their actors and their talent by doing a lot of that. And it ultimately really did kind of tank the theatrical experience for almost a couple years, which, we're really still kind of seeing people coming back to the theater en masse. It's good that we've had some billion-dollar films in Top Gun and Barbie, almost an Oppenheimer, and so many others, especially not being comic book properties. It's nice to see other films reaching that goal line. So whether it was as an act of good faith leading into Dune Part 2, which definitely should be watched in IMAX, they released the film for about a week, I believe, and I thought, okay, I think the only time I saw Dune in theaters was back when it was the day and date. I went for my best friend's birthday. We went to one of those 21 and up theaters, so we were having some food and we were having some drinks, and I remember at the time knowing next to nothing about the story I was going to watch. I knew it was sort of the inspiration for Star Wars, but that was about it. I'd watched a couple trailers. I thought, hey, this looks good. I'm a really big fan of Denis Villeneuve, who's the director, whether it's Blade Runner 2049, which is like a freaking sci-fi masterpiece, or Arrival, or Sicario, or Prisoners or Enemy. I mean, the guy just doesn't miss. It was really cool. I was thinking ahead of time. I was like, all right, this is gonna be a nice new sci-fi saga to get into. So we watched the movie, and I remember we enjoyed it enough that we went right home and watched it again on HBO Max, and then probably watched it again the next day because it was like, this is pretty fascinating. Just because you're introduced to this whole new world, you're introduced to this empire, this galaxy full of different planets and different houses. You're 10,000 years almost into the future. Humanoid species exist, but there's definitely also some kind of alien-like creatures. And I'll say what I really benefited from by seeing this again in IMAX, not only was because it felt like, whoa, I mean, it looked good in theaters and it looks good at home, but damn, Dune deserves to be seen in IMAX. I mean, hearing the drums, all the different instruments that Hans Zimmer brings in throughout the movie, I mean, it literally places you in that world. And it completely takes you out of whatever reality you're in. And so, I mean, first and foremost, seeing the reissue in IMAX was worth it, if only for just the spectacle of taking it in an IMAX, taking in the action, the audio. But it just also, I mean, I got so much more out of this story at its core, this idea of political intrigue, this jealous emperor who is trying to kind of quell some of this strength that the Atreides family has been gaining, piss off the Harkonnens while you're at it. Because I remember watching the first film and feeling really good about it and feeling like, well, that's a solid part one. It's pretty much its own movie. Definitely leaves you on the cliffhanger almost at the end. But, in 2 hours, 2.5 hours or so, it really does lay a lot of the basic groundwork and then some in-depth groundwork as far as what's happening in the world, who the Bene Gesserit are, how for centuries they've sort of been planting prophecies on every planet, and then they're almost using eugenics to try to control the proper births from bloodlines so that one day they can create an all-powerful male child. They're only taught to birth girls, but then Lady Jessica obviously has Paul Atreides with Duke Leto Atreides of Caladan. And so she really screws everything up because it's like, well, this boy better be the one. So there was just more, I feel like, from either the Bene Gesserit side, I understood more from the Imperium side of, okay, what's going on with the Emperor? What's the history with the Harkonnens? I think watching at home with subtitles maybe helped as well, just because I was following along a little bit better, and then seeing it in the big screen, it was like, okay, I know enough of what's happening now, and I'm like really feeling the weight of a lot of these situations. And so, in moments where the Harkonnens and the Sudeker take over and come to Arrakis to try to kill the Atreides family, so much of that carries so much more weight. Losing Leto just kills me. But the story really jumps out, and this intrigue with the Fremen, and just how, and I say a lot of this having seen Dune Part 2 now, and thinking back to Part 1 and what they set up. I think they handle the Fremen really well, from their technology to how they hide to some of their codes of honor, and all of that just completely builds in Part 2. But I think Part 2 works so well because they do such a good job here in Part 1 conveying the importance of these people to Arrakis, to the desert, how they inhabit it. It's interesting to watch because Timothée Chalamet is much younger, a few years younger in the first movie than he is in the second. And I think he really plays the role of Paul well, this young boy who's kind of thrust almost into this position of needing to step up, whether it is to lead for his mother and for whoever might be left of the Atreides family, or finding the Fremen and taking on the goal maybe that his father once had before him. And Chalamet does a good job. He's not the whiny Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill archetype, but through his visions and through these feelings, you can tell that he's got a lot that's weighing on him, and there's still this boyish nature, I think, in him, whether it's when he lashes out or when he gets emotionally frustrated. There's just some terrific moments, especially between him and Rebecca Ferguson, that really build in the second film as well. But here in this first film, her not kind of telling him everything about this prophecy they've been laying, him feeling like he's kind of been shoehorned into this whole position and people are going to worship him when he doesn't deserve it. And him feeling the weight of that as well on this new planet. So that part of the storyline, I think I paid a little bit more attention to, and was very, very interesting to see. And it's interesting to watch how Paul's visions can change, which of them kind of stay true, the bits of which of them remain true, whether people are different, like the locations maybe change. I really enjoyed a lot of that. And I remember liking in the first film just, I'm all for dialogue, and I mentioned this in the Dune Part 2 review, but, Denis Villeneuve came out and said, kids these days, they want longer stories, less dialogue, more spectacle. Because it felt like for a while we got onto a point where, dialogue is everything. Dialogue is what we're looking for. If you're not over explaining everything to the audience, then it's a bad call because they're not going to figure it out. Sometimes, there were moments where I'm like, all right, I'm definitely going to have to do some research after this, because Dune is a dense book. It's a dense world with a lot going on, but that's almost kind of fun for me sometimes. Like after I saw Prometheus, it was like, there's so many connections I'm trying to make here. Like, what if this is a product of that, and that's why we see this little thing? For me, it's kind of fun to get online and to engage with others about that, look at different theories, see if it works, look at the past films or the source material and how it matches up, perhaps. So I don't know. I went with my sister, my best friend, and my dad, and we'd all seen Dune Part 1 in some capacity in the theaters and then at home. But we all left feeling like, wow, especially in IMAX. Like, that was astounding. It was just a visceral, engaging experience that in some ways kind of reminds me of how I felt when I was watching Avatar for the first time. Arrakis might not be as beautiful as Pandora and as glowing and bioluminescent as the oceans and the forests of Pandora, but there's this calming feeling that you get like when you're looking out at the double suns from Tatooine as John Williams' score swells behind you. There's these beautiful breathtaking moments out in the desert, on Caladan, even in Gidi Prime, where there's sort of, I mean, that creepy little spider creature, and David Desmalchin, and Stellan Skarsgård floating around. There's just so much in this film that is cool, serves a larger purpose, and also just kind of really, I think, embeds you in that world. I'm always just frustrated at how little time Oscar Isaac feels like he has in the story, because he's just a sensational actor. And in this role as Duke Leto Atreides, I mean, he's stoic, he can be vulnerable, but he is just a good guy. And, his relationship with Chalamet in the film, as brief as it is, are just some really beautiful moments, I think, between the two of them. And I just, it's a movie death that really, you're just like, fuck. It's just, it hurts. It hurts. I'm like, I needed more of him. Stellan Skarsgård, every bit just as creepy, especially in IMAX. Anytime he turns on his little back flotation device, and it almost sounds like this weird clicking of magnets and things, it's really unsettling. He's kind of doing some of the Colonel Kurtz bald head wipe in the steam. You can see some of the Vader Emperor influence just in how they kind of conceal him in some ways. He's awesome. And when he gets back in that balsamic pit after being exposed to the poison, I mean, there's just so much stuff in this movie that's just weird, but it works because it's just like, hey, we're going with it. They're taking it seriously, so I'm taking it seriously. And I think that is probably one of the biggest fundamental differences between this world and stories and the Star Wars stories, is because for the most part, Star Wars is less serious. Or it focuses more so on some of the funnier, goofier, sillier, weirdo creatures who are in the galaxy and inhabit it. And while there is, of course, a serious story at the core, you can certainly see where they took some liberties, or see where it was like, well, this is maybe a little bit heavy or weird, so we're going to go a lighter, weird way with it. But I mean, I was very, very impressed watching Dune Part 1 in IMAX again. It was an awesome experience, solidified a lot of ways that I felt about the film. I really do like it. I think Part 2 is better, and most of that is because it just builds off a really terrific Part 1. I could watch Dune Part 1 on its own and be totally fine, but I think my wife said it well. It was just kind of like, maybe part of my not loving it at the time too, or feeling less engaged with it at the time, maybe was like, okay, well, Warner Brothers hadn't greenlit Dune Part 2. Denis Villeneuve wanted to film Part 1 and Part 2 back to back, which for a studio saves you a ton of money, saves everybody a ton of time. You keep up contingency as far as people's age, looks, hair, everything. You just already have everything there. You can plan it out with the actors for their schedules, because then otherwise you were waiting then for HBO Max and theater results, waiting for the green light for Part 2, which we all knew was going to come, but now comes a year plus after the original filming. And then now you've got to get everybody back in. Timothée Chalamet has only gotten better as an actor, has taken on more roles. So it really screws things up, because Christopher Nolan was talking about this, and the idea that, Peter Jackson shooting the Lord of the Ring movies back to back to back. He's like, it's just extraordinary. That'd be a dream. But to do that as a single director as well, he's like, that's a serious undertaking. So, I think now that we're in a place where you can watch Part 1 and then go experience Part 2, that full 5 hours plus whatever that experience is unbelievable. And it absolutely rivals the likes of Star Wars, the original 3 films, I would say. I think it's better. These films are better, I think, than the prequel Star Wars films, the sequel ones we've got now, the Disney ones. Rogue One and Andor are the 2 outliers from an entire catalog of like mediocre Star Wars quality stuff. I mean, there's good stuff at varying degrees in all the ones that have come out since the late 90s, but Dune, I mean, like, this is serious storytelling, this is purposeful storytelling, and this is just masters of their craft operating at the highest level everywhere. So I know it's out of theaters now in the IMAX format again, but should it pop up again, go see it. Watch this at home before you go see Dune Part 2. I highly encourage that as well, because it's only going to make that experience even better. Thank you guys for listening in. This was nice because, there's a lot of films I feel like I loved and enjoyed when I wasn't reviewing movies. And so it's kind of cool to be able to go back, share some of that first experience, kind of compare it with this new one. And in this case, obviously, it bleeds right into a brand new movie experience as well. So I think that's pretty cool. So thank you for humoring me for an old review. As always, you can find NT Movie Reviews on all social media platforms. Social media networks, podcast platforms, anywhere you get your videos, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever. Thank you as always for listening, and stay tuned because there can be a plethora of re-releases and incredible IMAX releases in the next couple months here. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.